Welcome to the Edges of Lean. I'm Bella Engelbach, and in this podcast we explore the human and creative side of lean thinking, unusual places where lean thinking is practiced. We meet people who are practicing continuous improvement in many different flavors and styles. So come along with me on a journey to the edges of lean. Episode 67, Continuous Improvement and Task Balancing with Kevin Gazzara. One of the secrets of getting to flow in a work process is to level the load. Not overburdening the process and managing the natural volatility of inputs has a remarkable effect on productivity. My guest, Kevin Gazzara, has insights about how to do this in our brains. Check out our fascinating conversation. Dr. Kevin Gazzara, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Hi, good to be here, Bella. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, thanks for coming. So, Kevin, tell us about yourself. And you've had, I think, a pretty long and varied career. So give us the highlights and tell us what you're doing now.
Well, let's start from what I'm doing now. Currently, I am a senior partner at Magna Leadership Solutions. It's a firm that we started about 15 years ago when I retired from Intel in 2007. And we provide management and leadership programs. We have something called the Lean Forward Academy that we do for lots and lots of companies around the world. We have programs right now running in, Shanghai, Tokyo, Amsterdam, through about a half a dozen cities through the US. We do them virtually and in person. And in addition to that, I am an ICF executive coach and a positive intelligence coach. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment and kind of what's led me here, which has been not quite the linear progression, is started out my undergraduate degrees are dual degree in engineering and business from Drexel. Then I did my MBA and went off and did all my doctoral work in organizational leadership. And I've moved from the technical side where I work for Transamerica Corporation. And then my last 18 years before I retired from Intel in product management, I was an operations manager, general manager. But my last 10 years I spent managing Intel University and the management leadership development residential programs around the world for Intel. And when we used to do 2,500 managers and leaders in 10 different countries each year. And when I retired in 2007 with two of my colleagues to start up management, Magna Leadership, we had just finished training our 40,000th manager.
That is a lot of training, Kevin. Wow. So I always think it's fascinating when I meet people like you who have the technical background, the engineering degree, the business background, but who've really gotten into the organizational side, which I think leads you to the, obviously to the people side, to some stuff that leans more into psychology and sociology. And I was wondering what it was that led you sort of out of being an engineer and into that pathway.
Right. As many of my technical buddies would say, I've moved over to the dark side from the technical side to the HR world. Well, I'm glad you asked that because it's a really interesting story. I had put together this 15-year plan. So when I was 35, I had this desire or this vision to retire at 50. And my goal was at 50, I wanted to do my next phase of life and give back, right? To be able to take the knowledge that I've gained and actually help organizations that didn't have $10 million budgets for management leadership and help them get better. And that was kind of my vision. And I think one of the things that I did, which was really important, I've always had fantastic mentors throughout my career, my life. And when I was at Intel, I solicited a mentor. Essentially, she was my coach and my mentor. And she was the HR director for HR. She sat on Andy Grove's staff. And and her name is Cecilia. Wonderful, wonderful mentor. She mentored me for many, many years. And I approached her because I had started doing, as a manager at Intel, you had to teach 40 hours a year, right? So that you had to teach. So I started getting into the teaching, which I recognized, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this, and I really enjoy it, and it really energizes me. And as I was getting mentored on a monthly basis, meeting with Cecilia, we laid out a long-term plan, and the initial plan was the normal plan, I think, that everybody has, which is, you start out as an engineer or as an individual contributor, and you move into a supervisor and a manager, and then a more senior manager, and then ultimately group manager, and it's a really nice long progression along the lines of your competence.
Have your technical expertise, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So building deeper and deeper technical knowledge.
Right. Yeah. So, so the goal is, ultimately you want to get to CEO, and you want to have a big staff and make lots of money and have lots of people report to you and have that power. And that's, I think, what we've been taught and kind of what all of the models look like in industry. And what I recognized was, and what Cecilia helped me recognize, was that she talked to me much more about the things that really energized me and engaged me and so forth. And because I had started teaching, I recognized that was an area that really I was running towards it, right? Like I couldn't get enough of it, right? And that's kind of getting in this flow zone of where you are. So I had the opportunity. Intel has something called sabbatical. So every 7 years, they give you a sabbatical where you take 2 months off and you disconnect, you leave all your electronics back in the office, and you go and recharge. And typically when you go on a sabbatical, there's usually an opportunity when you come back to do something a little differently, because essentially you haven't been doing your job for 2 months. Someone else is filling in. And when I came back, because I had been working with Cecilia for a couple of years, one of the guy that actually ran Intel University for all of Intel said, hey, I've seen you teach. I know that you're passionate about this. Would you consider moving out of the technical side to do this? We really need someone that can manage a team and all of the training and development for Arizona. And just to give you an idea, people think, oh, well, how hard can that be? Is Arizona, we were doing about 800 to 900 classes a month, which was unbelievable to manage. And the people that they had in there, I was actually the third manager in 18 months. The first two resigned, and the third one, I think, had a nervous breakdown. So when I got into the job, which is what I love, it's the engineer side of me is problem solving. Most of the people that were in this world didn't have a technical background, but since I had, managed design teams and software teams and so forth, I really had an appreciation for what they were going through. So that's how that transition happened. And I've stayed in that world ever since.
So you were able to bring those technical skills, at least the problem solving skills, into that really big, essentially, problem that you were handed of how to manage all of these classes, right? And then and so that's, so it's a really great segue. But I love what you said, Kevin, about this idea that we're all supposed to be on the path to be CEO. And the problem is, as I learned early in my career, is we can't all be CEO unless, we all become independent entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
There's not that many CEO roles to be had, but there are so many other things that may float our boat even better. And it sounds like you found that, and you found that direction. So I think that is a great story. Did it feel like a really big leap, though? Getting off that engineering path and going over to the dark side?
Yes, actually it did. It was, it was a chance. You have to, if you study anything with regard to change management, this is a radical shift. from dealing with bits and bytes and cache sizes on chips and so forth. I think the thing that I had the advantage of is I spent a lot of time in product marketing as well. So I spent a lot of time on the customer side. So so I have I like the engineering stuff. I like the human stuff as well, and being able to have that interface on a regular basis, and moving into a non-technical role, still managing people, felt the transition felt okay. It was a completely different world, and I'm a continuous learner, so I love the additional learning. So, and it was a new level of challenge, and I think anybody that's listening to the podcast would recognize that, in engineering challenges, it's more black and white, it's zeros and ones, and so forth. When you move into the human realm, things are a lot more gray, and things are generally not black and white. So I think it adds that next level of challenge if you're willing to take it. So yes, so the answer is it was absolutely a big shift, probably one of the best things I had ever done, and it's always a little scary.
Yeah, to make that leap. And I'm just pondering, actually, Kevin, my own language and your language around talking about engineering as technical, and this, engineering is, black and white. You can reduce things to data, numbers. You can make the chart, the graph. You can track the knowledge that you gain as you do the work in a way that is very factual, right? Because you're dealing, even if you're dealing at Intel with tiny objects, you're still dealing with physical objects. But it occurs to me that there's a technical side to being a leader and a technical side to training as well. And we might not think of that as being technical, but there is, right? And there are things that we can develop skills around and build knowledge around. It just might be harder to make a chart or a graph, a spreadsheet, a database out of it.
Well, I think the big difference, and we get into lots of these discussions with our clients, Bella, is that things in the human side are more subjective than objective, right? So people see things differently. And when you have subjective elements, they're a little bit more difficult to manage, particularly if you don't have a good metric system around that. I mean, one of the things that I learned, I was very fortunate at Intel. There were 4 of us that were chosen to go get certified with Peter Senge on the 5th discipline and systems thinking. And I taught systems thinking from all my years at Intel, from 96 through when I retired in 2017. And then I've been teaching systems thinking as well, not only in my in the business. I'm also been a professor at 6 different universities, so taught systems thinking there. And I think it's bringing that systems thinking mentality of looking at everything, whether it's a human system or it's a process system, and looking at it in very much of the same way. So I think the technical side provided a really good base in order to transition that into the human side.
So when we're talking about a system, right, that has people in it, as you said, we have this difficulty of knowing that, hopefully knowing or having the presence of mind to know that other people have different perspectives or perceive things differently from us. But I think it's very challenging to manage that. And I'd love to hear what are some of your ideas, your principles around, dealing with the fact that other people are going to see things differently and perceive things differently from the way we ourselves do.
Yeah, and I think you've really hit on the nail on the head, is that people do have different perceptions, they have different behavioral styles, they have different value sets or things that are important to them as far as what's what motivates them or demotivates them, and really understanding that. One of the things that we use in our leadership program, Bella, is a model that was originally done or looked at around from Harvard Business Review, which was the 3 commandments of leadership, which they talk about The first thing is the best leaders kind of know thyself, right? So it's really understanding yourself. The second is understanding others. And then the third commandment is initiating and sustaining change, right? So you can't really be a leader if you just do one or two. You have to do the third one as well. And what we found was that our leadership programs, and what I learned through lots of the stuff that I had done, either teaching or developing programs at Intel, was that you really have the best programs and the best leaders start with an internal look rather than an external look. And there's lots of different things. There's lots of assessments out there that you can look at. I could talk a little bit about the ones that we use. So focusing in on yourself gives you the abilities to understand others and then initiate and sustain change. And the challenge is that most leaders, particularly in the Western cultures, most leaders people love to live in kind of the act phase of the doing, of the change and so forth. And they start there, and they really haven't invested the time in the first two, and particularly the first one about knowing yourself. So one of the things that we do, we use a whole suite of assessments. We've worked very closely for the last 20 plus years with a company called Target Training International. Wonderful people, wonderful company, great assessments. They got dozens of different assessments. The ones that we use extensively are around DISC or behaviors, kind of understanding your styles and how you perceive things differently. That's a good foundational one. And then we move into driving forces, which is kind of our values base of the things kind of under the iceberg of what you can't see. So really getting a deeper understanding of what drives us and others. And then we use a third assessment, which is called the task quotient, or TQ. And that is around understanding the balance of task types that you like around percentages of routine troubleshooting and problems routine troubleshooting and project tasks. So if you look at everybody's different mixtures, there's 496 discrete mixtures. If you look at what we like to do, each one of us likes to do a certain percentage of routine work, certain percentage of problem solving or troubleshooting work, and a certain percentage of project work. And when you identify the ideal mixture and you can balance your day or week or year, month, whatever, around that, we've proven statistically that you can raise your level of job satisfaction, motivation, and empowerment of people. So we use those as really the foundation to kind of understand yourself, know thyself, and then we apply that to understanding others. And then once you have that foundation, you can really initiate and sustain change in a very sustainable way, instead of the kind of the hit and run.
So one of the things that's interesting to me about these type of assessments, Kevin, is that if we don't understand them well, we can use them in a bad way, right? We can sort of peg ourselves as, well, I always do this, or I can't do that, or I'm not the kind of person who can do this. Or we can say that about other people. So what do you do to overcome that, to help people get that deeper knowledge and be more flexible with their approach?
Excellent point, Bella. One of the things that we won't do is we won't give someone an assessment without the opportunity, either in a class environment or in one-on-one environment, to really walk them through and get them to understand what it is, because they can be drastically misused, right? That they can kind of pigeonhole themselves into a certain area, and that is really not the intention. One of the things that we say is that everyone has all of the let's use DISC for example, that everyone has the DIS and C has a certain percentage of that in them, right? It's getting people to move from judging people to valuing them. And the thing is this should not be used as a hammer. You should not be able to say, well, hey, I'm a high D, just live with it. Or, I'm a high C, this is important to me, so not important to you. It's getting that recognition. The thing is that we can all adapt. And the key is the more I can appreciate your style. And the thing that we do know is having teams that have that really nice balance of all of the different styles are the high performing teams. When you have teams where you hire people that are exactly like you, generally that causes more problems than it solves.
Yeah, that's the danger of hiring for quote unquote cultural fit, right? Because that can take you down the path of hiring your clone, and that is not necessarily, in fact, it isn't what's going to help you have a high performing team. But it is very important to have people with different styles and different ways of perceiving the world and different ways of reacting to the world, right? That's going to drive innovation. It's going to drive faster forward movement.
Yeah, and I think here's the gap in industry or in the world today is that we don't take the time. I mean, we did some research many years ago, looking at hundreds of people about what the most important thing was to be the leader. And my business partner, Dr. Ali Lakhani, who was my co-author of the book that we wrote on leadership called The Leader of Oz. He did all of his doctoral work around doing statistical correlations with different leadership competencies and how they related to how the leader was viewed. And what he found was he looked at 70 different countries. I think the total was over 1,000 leaders around the world. And what he found statistically, and he's a black belt, Six Sigma lean guy. He taught all of our classes in that. What he found was something that was really interesting, that the number one leadership practice or competency around the world, usually in the very first position of the 10 that he had identified, was communication. And one of the challenges is once you know thyself using either whatever assessments that you're going to use, is that I don't think we take the time to help people work on their communication. So what happens is that you get this very, very aggressive communication rather than assertive, where people are kind of using their behavioral styles as a hammer, right? And I think you need to have that second piece coupled with the understanding of the assessment first, so that when you have that really dominant individual, where you have that very cautious individual, so forth, that you give them the tools to communicate in a way that the other styles can hear them. And I think that's the place that we found that organizations do a terrible job, and that's one of the reasons that that's the foundational piece in our leadership program.
And it's probably made worse by the tendency of organizations to want to put spin on communication as well, right? So even if a leader does have a clear and direct message and is hoping to be able to get that message across, whether it's in a written communication or verbal communication, there's often a sort of PR piece that goes on top of that can be unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think there's another thing is that we have a tendency to kind of measure leaders on output, right? And one of the things I learned from Senge in the fifth discipline in particular, in the systems thinking, is that usually when there's a problem, Senge talks about systems influencing performance or behaviors. Right. And when you have a bad system in place, that you're going to get bad behaviors, you're going to get bad performance. And one of the things that I think corporations are starting to recognize, or have started to recognize very slowly, I think it's coming out, is that sometimes you need multiple metric systems. You need the performance metric system. I mean, people have to do what they're supposed to do, getting the designs out, getting the manufacturing out. You have to hold people accountable. I listened to your session, I think it was 59 with
Mary Ann Snow.
Mary Ann Snow, yes.
Yeah.
And she talked about that. So people that haven't listened to it, listen to, that's a great interview that you had done. And she talks about change management, a lot of the stuff that would kind of dovetail into this session. And I think when you have a system that only measures output performance and it doesn't measure what we have two measurement systems. We have organizational performance and business results. Most companies or all companies measure business results, how much margin you're making, how many product are we getting out, those type of things. The best companies, the high performing companies, measure what we call org performance. And that's putting a measurement system in place of attracting and retaining and getting the best engagement, motivation out of an individual. So you don't have to spend the time of kind of replacing and doing the turnover, dealing with turnover. Best organizations have a relatively low turnover. And the one thing we found is you look at a high performing organization, I will guarantee you close to 100%, if not 100%, that they're only measuring the business performance or the business results and not the organizational performance. And once you put those two elements, those two measurements in place, having the ability to balance those, so you're not getting, the one manager that's the touchy-feely manager, it's all about people and so forth, and people love to work there and they don't get any output, or it's the other manager, which is the more common one, where they're getting the output, yet it's a revolving door because they're losing so many people. When you can get that right balance, then you have an amazing opportunity for longevity, and it's really moving beyond kind of the Wall Street model, which I think is the curse in the current in any kind of capitalistic environment, is the 90-day window, right? What did you do for the last 90 days? And you have to be able to think much longer term, and if you can do that, you can be successful.
Yeah, so I mean that's really interesting. I mean, I was going to say the reason, obviously, as we know, that the companies have these output metrics, these performance metrics, is 100% because that's what their investors are looking for, right? The investors ostensibly want to see that, and I don't know too many companies that go into investor meetings and talk about employee engagement, but they probably should, right? And
Yes.
I often wonder why organizations don't show the cost of their turnover and how the cost of turnover or the cost of lack of engagement is actually impacting the top line and their bottom line, because they do. There's plenty of research that shows that.
Yeah, and actually, that's a really good point. We recognized that early on, and several years ago. In fact, we just re-released it. Is anyone that's listening, you can go to attritioncalculator.com. Right, it's a free tool that we have that we use to have a discussion when people come to us and they say, we need a leadership program. How much is it going to cost? And we tell them, well, we're not going to tell you what it costs. We're going to tell you how much it's going to save you. And we want to know what's your attrition costing you. And I'd say at least all the customers we've ever talked to have no idea. It's like, I don't know, or we don't know. So we pull up the tool. I think it has about 20 different variables that are kind of built into it. Actually, we put in three numbers, like how many people do you have, either the department or the company or whatever, what's your turnover rate, and then what's the typical salary for the individuals, and you put it in there, and instantaneously it gives you, like within seconds or less, it gives you what it's costing you for the turnover. We just did this with a larger company in the Southwest, and we were talking with the HR director and the CEO, where they had thousands of people, and we asked them this question and they didn't know. So we went through there and they were losing about $7 million a year. This is real money. This has nothing to do with intellectual property or anything like that. That was on top of that. This was a call center environment, and we said,
which typically have high turnover.
Right. Yep. So we looked at what they were losing, and we said, okay, so we can't get you. I think it was about 32% turnover. So we can't get you all 32% of that. We can certainly cut it in half, or at least get you 10% back, right? So we'd say maybe we can't save you 7 million. We can at least save you 700,000. What would you invest to get $700,000 back? And we asked them, if you got a 10-to-1 return on your investment, would you make that investment? They said, well, of course. We said, okay, it's $70,000.
That's a great way to do pricing. Yeah.
Yeah. So we only do value pricing rather than, cost per session and so forth. And then we work with them to make sure that we're able to get the turnover down. And the good news was we were able to get the turnover down way beyond what we had expected. But I think the one thing that we learned was it raises another problem is once you figure out how to hire the type of people that you want and do the training for them, if you throw them into a system where you have bad management and bad leadership, getting that extra reduction of turnover becomes impossible. So ultimately what we said was, hey, now we've done kind of what we have called the benchmarking process, so that you're hiring the right kind of people. They were hiring all the wrong kind of people, using all the different assessments. They're hiring people that needed to go into an environment where they had a high routine, and they were high, and because they weren't using the task quotient assessment, they weren't assessing that, and they were putting people that had like a 7% routine desire in a position where 80% of the time they're doing routine. So once we
they didn't want to follow. They didn't want to follow the script. It wasn't going to float their boat to follow the script. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, it's as you know, it's very complex.
But that's really important, though, Kevin, what you just said. So get the right people in there, get the people who actually relish a high routine environment, and then you put them in a situation with a bad manager. They are still not going to stay, right? They might stay a little bit longer because the work is satisfying to them, but they're not going to stay if they're treated badly by their manager. And that's another thing. Everybody knows that people leave because of management. So then, what is it that the managers then have to? Because I'm sure some of the people who are in management in an organization like that are the people who want to get past the doing the routine work and want to do things differently, want to be more involved in problem solving. And now they've got to relate to these people who are probably quite different from them.
Well, so Dr. Lacani and I had written an article. I'm sure you can find it on the web anywhere. You can get it at our website under our, I think it's blog or articles at magnaleadership.com. I think if you just do a Google search, you'll be able to get it. We wrote a book. We wrote an article called "Throw the Seats Off the Bus." So it was based around the work that Jim Collins had done in Good to Great about get the right people in the right seats on the bus. And our philosophy is a little bit different. And to answer your question is that what we found was that you need to bring certainly people that have the talent and the skills and desires, right? You need to place them in an environment. Typically, we bring these 300-pound people and stick them in 100-pound desks, right? And we do everything possible to kind of fit them in. And what we said is throw the seats off the bus and throw the beanbag chairs in there, and allow the people to you don't necessarily have to change their job. You want to adjust the tasks that they're doing that fit the kind of things that they need. And when we've gone in and we've analyzed organizations, almost 100% of the time, In fact, I think it's probably 100% of the time. The people in the organization have the right people. The difference is because the jobs are much more siloed, right? And there's not a lot of opportunity to kind of work on different tasks. I'm not going to do your job. There might be a task that you like to do that I don't, and vice versa. That if you allow that flexibility, kind of in the beanbag chair rather than kind of squishing you into the desk, then you can get a lot better results. So it's allowing that. It's not a restructuring; it's a reformatting of how you do tasks and who does the task and who can help each other, and you allow people to gravitate towards what they love. Then you're going to get the retention. You're also going to get better performance, engagement, motivation. You get lots and lots of stuff that happens there. So it's that ability.
That's really cool, because I think what you're doing there, that's the definition of inclusion. Inclusion isn't, fitting the person into the role or the job. Inclusion is allowing change so that that person's unique attributes can be manifested the best in the way that is the most comfortable for them. So for people who are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's what inclusion is. Inclusion is let's figure out together how does what you bring to the organization, how do we use that in the work that we're doing. But the other thing I love about what you said is that also can really lead to a self-managed team, right? Because if people are working together and you don't have this sense, all right, this is my job and I'm only allowed to do my job, but I can see what your work is and I can see that you need some help over here, and hey, I like to do that kind of thing, or I can learn to do that kind of thing. That also helps people feel less alone in their work, right? And our work can get done faster because we're not waiting for the right person, the appropriate person to do the job. We're waiting for, we can hand it off and share it better. And I've certainly seen that in a really good lean environment where people, they can see the work, the work is made visual for them. And then people can say, hey, I can help you with that. I'd like to learn that. Or, that's something that I think would be fun to do. Can you show me how to do that?
Yeah,
so.
and I love to share with you a 3-minute anecdotal story here.
Yeah.
So the task quotient is actually an assessment that I had developed, and I developed it for my doctoral dissertation because my doctoral work was around kind of understanding the relationship of task types, balance for motivation, job satisfaction, and flow. Right, getting people into this concept of flow or being in the zone. So I had to develop, there wasn't an assessment. So as part of my research, I had to develop an assessment tool. And I developed the task quotient that Target Training International distributes, which is I'm grateful for. When we were first doing it, one of the distributors I work with wanted to use this at a kitchen staff in Maine at a nursing home. And he said, I want to evaluate a team there. Can I use this? And it's like, yeah, sure, absolutely. So he ran the assessments. Now, there are probably a dozen people on the team. I think probably half of them had a high school education. No one had a college education. And they were doing kitchen staff stuff in a very large kind of retirement or nursing home. And when he got everything back, because the task quotient identifies or predicts the level of job satisfaction for the individuals, almost all of them came back at a very, very high job satisfaction, close to like 95 to 100%.
Wow.
I remember him calling me and saying, hey, you know what, I think I don't think your assessment's working, right? Because I just did this and we have all the people basically said they're happy and they're engaged in their job. And he said, how can this be? They're like in washing dishes in a kitchen or serving food. Like, this can't be. So I said, well, have you had a discussion with them? And he said, no. I said, go have a discussion with them. And what he found was kind of what I was just talking about was he said, hey, I've looked at your assessment. Here's your assessment. You can read the assessment. Is this correct? And they all said the same thing. Yeah, this is correct. and they said, I want to know why your job satisfaction is so high. And he says, you're a dishwasher. Like, how can you do that? He says, like, yeah, well, that's kind of what I was hired for. And most of them had been there like 10, 12, 15 years. And he said, yeah, but our manager doesn't think of me as a dishwasher. I am particularly good at, and one was good at like fixing things like electrical things. And another person was really good at the people side and doing the greeting and helping people out. And he said, we work together as a team. And yes, do I have a deliverable? I have to get the dishes done. Of course I do, right? So I have to do that. A lot of times people who are out front, dealing with the people that are sick need a break. So they come in and they cover for me doing the dishes. They get a little bit of a break there. And that's kind of what I recognized was all of these things are different task types that they're doing, and allowing that flexibility, that beanbag chair kind of environment, where even though you may have a title, and giving the people that opportunity to do what's necessary for the team at the time, where you're not saying, well, that's not my job, really does contribute. And, one of the things the manager said is, I spend all of my time doing other strategic things, right? My team kind of self-manages themselves. And by the way, I have to spend hardly any time at all, year after year doing anything of the hiring and firing, because I've got good people that do good work.
Wow. That is a great story. And I just love that, the beanbag chair environment, Just pull up your beanbag chair where you need it, where you're comfortable, where you want to learn something, and go fix something if you need to fix it. Yeah. So no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You got a question?
Yeah, I do. So the task quotient. So what you're saying is, as everybody has a task quotient at a particular, wherever you are in your stage in life, there are certain types of tasks that you're going to enjoy more, you're going to relish more, and the more that your work day reflects that preferred task quotient, at the end of the day, the more satisfied you're going to be, the more engaged you're going to be.
Absolutely. And like my dissertation was a quantitative one, so I had to quantitatively do this. And right now, I think we've run a little over 7,000 people through it. And the good news is, I didn't know whether I was going to get a chance to talk about this or not. I did create a URL for the users that if you want to take the assessment as a gift, I'm going to give your URL where you can take it at the end of this call, and then you can take it yourself, and anyone listening can take it just as my gift for no cost.
All right. Well, so why don't you go ahead and give that, and we'll put that in the show notes for folks.
Sure. It's you go to we use Bitly, so we use it's a URL shortener. If you go to Magna Leader .co.com /gift, all in capital letters, GIFT, that will take you right to the assessment. So that's my gift to you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So let me address the last question you had about kind of the understanding of how to use the test quotient. Is we all have a different balance. I've even done tests with individuals that I did with my staff, because I developed it while I was still at Intel, to test for this. And one of the things is that typically 99.5% of the people all have some need for each of the three tasks. There's very few people. Every once in a while, you'll get an outlier that will only have a desire or have a need for two of the task types. We've never seen any individual that's had only one of the task types, but typically people need a different percentage. And on the average, it's probably people need about, see if I can pull the percentages out of the air. I think it was somewhere around about 18 to 20% people need, on average, this is of about 7,000 people for the graph, About 18 to 20% people need routine work. I think it's around 25 to 27 people need troubleshooting work. And then the balance, which is project work, is around, I think, 40 to 45%, something like that. So people generally need more project work, bigger picture kind of thing. And the reason they need that is you get a different level of feedback and satisfaction from each. Routine work is just kind of turn the crank, read and delete the emails, those kind of things. You get a high frequency of good feedback, low intensity. It's not overly satisfying. As you move into troubleshooting or problem solving, the frequency comparatively drops off, right? You go fix that particular problem you're having with your computer or the refrigerator in the nursing home, or the project that you're working on where you can't get things to kind of sync up. You get a different level, kind of a medium level of feedback and a medium level of intensity, right? And then project work, a good example is like when you finish your taxes, right? You've worked on this for a long period of time, and happens once a year, that you get very, very high intensity of feedback, right? High satisfaction, and the frequency compared to troubleshooting and routine is much, much lower. And each one of us needs that different frequency and intensity, which the task quotient assessment will identify for you, needs that different frequency and intensity to be happy, engaged, motivated, and so forth. The other thing that happens is that you'll find that you have a cadence that happens, and in the cadence, that during the day, if you start paying attention, you're going to start wanting to go do different things. You're working on something, and all of a sudden you want to get up and go get a drink in the refrigerator, or walk around, or you want to pick up the phone, or you want to check your email, or go on Facebook, or whatever it is, right? Those are triggers for you that are saying, whatever I am doing now, I need to do a different task type. And the tendency for us, because people don't understand their particular needs of task types, what they do is they do a different task. And a lot of times they go from routine to routine to routine, right? And at the end of the day, they've done all routine work. They've gotten a very high frequency of feedback, of accomplishment, but the intensity is so low. At the end of the day, they just don't feel fulfilled. And what happens is if you don't, first of all, you need to kind of track when the little red flags go off, and then you need to do time blocking on your calendar if you have that flexibility. So rather than doing like all project on Friday, or I'm going to sit down, remember in college, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to lock myself in the dorm room, I'm going to write that, right? And 8 hours, and that never works. And the reason is because it's only a single task type that you're doing, right? And your brain needs that other frequency and intensity. So what I do is my routine work is I can handle, where my red flags go up, I can handle typically about 45 minutes of routine work. Troubleshooting typically is about an hour to an hour and a half. And the project work I find works best in 2-hour chunks. So rather than saying, hey, I need to design a new program this week, or I need to write a new description of the courses I'm delivering, or I need to do an analysis of someone I'm doing executive coaching for, what I do is and I say, this is going to take 10 hours. I don't block off Friday to do that. I do 2 hours a day in each of the 5 days, right? And at the end of the day, I've gotten the frequency, I've gotten the intensity I want. I feel that level of accomplishment. And guess what? When you block times out, instead of trying to do it at the last minute, you get a much better product. So understand your task quotient balance, track your frequency, and then start doing the time blocking and ask yourself, am I getting any of these different things? Now, one of the challenges is if you're working like in a call center, you may not have that kind of flexibility. You have to do the same kind of thing over and over and over again. Where for jobs that have some flexibility, maybe you don't need to do all of the level 1 calls on Mondays and all the level 2 calls on Tuesday. Maybe you need to do a little bit of a balance, because the level 1 calls may be something that you just instantly know there's no there's not a lot of problem solving and so forth, because it's kind of built in there. And then the next level calls are more troubleshooting. And then the third ones really you have to pull lots of things together and as a project are really a different type. If you have that ability to structure your job just a little bit, or even do some task sharing with one of your coworkers, I'm going to guarantee you're going to be happier. And my message to managers is if you can do this and you can keep the people happy, motivated, engaged, and in kind of that flow zone, then then when bonus time comes, you don't have to pay them that much more, because they're going to really evaluate whether they want to leave this highly engaged environment to move to something for another $1 an hour.
And as you were talking, it kept occurring to me that, first of all, this is workload balancing for your brain, right? So
Yes.
For those of us in Lean who are very interested in workload balancing, this is workload balancing for your brain, right? And it's going to actually, it always creates additional capacity when you do that. But then if you are a manager, what's stopping you from doing that analysis, particularly in a highly structured environment? What's stopping you from doing that analysis of the different types of work and actually getting into really balancing the workload for your employees? So, and it's probably some technical skill, but you can learn that technical skill. So go back to the technical skills.
Yeah.
So wow.
So what we've done is we usually do. And I don't know if call it a workshop or whatever, where we get everyone to take the task quotient, to plot their different tasks that they do on a big flip chart. I go in and facilitate that, or one of our staff does. And with the manager in the room, once everyone has all their tasks that they do plotted, and by the way, the tool that we use, which is connected with flow, the concept of flow and the task quotient, we work the two together. Everybody plots where all the work they're doing, what hours, what task types they are, and where it is, and whether it's in the zone or not. And then once everything is plotted, and typically we do this live, you have the flip charts all around the room. Each person is allowed to do, we call it a task auction, can sell anything that they do, right? There's no buying that happens. And you capture everything. Everybody gets 5 minutes to say, I'm working on this project. It's about 2 hours. It's a troubleshooting project. And that's not one that's highly motivated and engaged. I want to sell that, and that's 2 hours. Or maybe it's a 6-hour activity, and they only want to sell 2 hours of that, where they can work with someone else. And then you capture everything on an Excel sheet. And then once everybody's done, with the manager in the room, anyone can bid on any task.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. And what happens is typically you'll get a rebalance. Normally you get 60 to 70% rebalance, right? And now, because people are now working on things that are engaging for them, getting the buy-in is super easy, because they've made the choice. Now, here's the thing that we find over and over and over again, is at the end of the session, there's always a bucket of stuff that people don't want to do, right? You can imagine that. And 100% of the time, it is administrative. And what we recognize is you have, $120,000 engineers that are making arrangements, or setting up meetings, or making travel arrangements, or copying things, or having low-level conversations. What's happening is because we've gotten leaner and leaner and leaner and leaner, and there's less people. You have
leaner in the bad way, not
leaner in the bad way, right? Yes.
Yeah.
With kind of less staff, that a lot of the things, the more routine administrative kind of things, have kind of crept into that in that area. And what we usually find out, particularly in organizations that, anywhere between 10 to 20 people or so, that they really need some level either of automation or some level of administrative assistance. And instead of hiring another person at 120,000 and give them a little piece of the routine stuff, they'll hire somebody as a temp or whatever that's, at $40,000 or $30,000. It's cheaper. It gives them the kind of things that they want.
That they like to do. Yeah.
Right. And it offloads all the crap work from the highly paid people.
And it's not crap work to someone who's an administrative assistant. It's something they enjoy doing, and they like seeing how it helps other people. So yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So Kevin, let me ask you one last question here.
Sure.
And that is, what is your one piece of advice for a young person studying out?
Well, I think I would ask people to use my experience maybe as an archetype or as a role model, maybe not a role model, is to go find someone to mentor you, to coach you, to be a sounding board for you. And you would be surprised and find someone that's doing the kind of things or that you kind of aspire to do. When I chose my mentor, Cecilia, I wanted somebody, because ultimately I knew I was going to be working with executives. I wanted someone that had daily activities with the C-suite. And she was HR for 80,000 person organization. And I said, I need that insight. Will you help me? Right. So go find a mentor and then start to identify the types of things that you really love to do. Like I had done, where I love to teach, and then figure out how you can expand that. You don't necessarily have to change your job. One of the things that I started doing is I expanded it I started teaching university classes in the evenings, just because I love to do that. And then ultimately, when I retired, because I had that experience at Intel, it allowed me to get hired. I was a professor at Arizona State, Grand Canyon, Drexel University, several other universities as well. So get the mentor, focus on what you love to do, and then start expanding that, whether it's in your job or outside of your job, to give you more of what you love to do.
Thanks. And Kevin, what your website?
So there's two websites you can go to. The main website for Magna Leadership is magnaleadership.com, or there's a secondary website that you can go to if you're interested in concepts of positive intelligence, kind of understanding yourself, kind of know thyself. If you go to pqtrainingandcoaching.com, you can find some stuff there as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for traveling with me to the edges of lean.
Thanks, Bella. I hope it's valuable to your listeners.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank Dr. Kevin Gazzara for being my guest on the Edges of Lean. Are you balancing your mental tasks? Would you like to learn more? We would love to hear from you. Find Kevin at magnaleadership.com or on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn or at leanforhumans.com, or comment wherever you watch or listen. Subscribe and tell a friend about the Edges of Lean. Please join me in exploring more of the Edges of Lean. There's a lot to learn. And check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com. You'll find more podcasts and videos with lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.